All right, guys. Hello, it's Miss Moore White. Welcome back. We're working on the beginning of chapter 15, slides 1 through 21. So I'm just going to go on and get started. Let me share my screen. Kaboom. Let's go on and get started. Uh-oh, what's going on here? There we go. All right, so chapter 15, reordering the world between 1750 and 1850. So if it's reordering the world, something must be happening with those former strongholds of the world. We're looking at China, we're looking at India, we're looking at the Islamic worlds, and we're going to see how they're going to be so impacted by the European colonial system and how Europe is going to start rising up during this time period. Because, you know, Europe was kind of behind until they figure out how to get on ships and colonize people. All right, let's go on and get started though. So our storylines: a new era based on radically new ideas of freedom and the nation states emerged in the Atlantic world. So we're going to talk about the formations of these new government ideas and actual new governments. But next up, we have the industrious and industrial revolutions transform communities and the global economy. This is going to be the first time where we're seeing really mass exportation, mass production of things spreading around the world. So previously, we have some mass production happening in China because there's just so many people in China. We're looking at like over 100 million people during this time period. But around the world, that's going to start happening right around 1800. And next up, the worldwide balance of power shifts decisively, towards Northwestern Europe. So all those places that were able to get those ships out and colonize the Americas, Southeast Asia, eventually Asia, Africa, they're going to be the ones who end up having a lot of financial power and therefore a lot of power throughout the world. So what we're going to look at, these are always up on the board. So we're going to describe the new ideas of freedom and explain how they differ from earlier understandings of this term. So what is freedom? What does it look like? And then also who gets access to it? And is it going to be hypocritical for those who are speaking upon it, especially some of the industries that they are going to be involved in? We're going to compare political and economic developments in the Atlantic world with regions elsewhere around the globe during the period 1750 to 1850. So what is happening economically? What is happening politically with the Atlantic world and also with places that they're interacting with? Identify and explain the key developments that constituted the Industrial Revolution. So what helps to get this started? And what does that actually look like? And why do we claim it starts in England first and not starting in China, where we could probably also look as well? We're going to explain patterns of global trade and economic growth and connect them to political changes during the period between 1750 and 1850. Finally, we're going to compare the groups of people who held power in each of the regions in 1750 and then in 1850 and explain the changes that took place during this period in these societies. All right, so where's the power going to go? Who's going to hold that power? What do these things look like? All of that's going to be on display with this one. Revolutionary transformations and new languages of freedom. As wealth increased and literacy increased, people demanded a relaxations of mercantilist restrictions and just more practice and more just practices. So basically, they're looking for more fairness and less, hey, I'm the monarch, I'm telling you what to do, and you're going to listen to me. So popular sovereignty, we're going to get into that in a little bit. What is popular sovereignty? This political power, talking about the people. What is that? Because this is the first time we're hearing that, because before, you know, we're looking at Machiavellian, the prince, those kind of principles where the state is more important than the person. And now we're going to see that being flipped around, where the person or the people are going to be incredibly important to the decisions that are made and how a country is led and what's going to happen in the long term with a country or a region. Ideas of a nation. So what does this look like? So those are going to be people who have that common language, that common culture, that common history. And that's going to be kind of what starts to unify people. So previously, these nations don't exist. These borders are like man-made, imaginary, arbitrary. They're not real. So once these borders start to kind of get more finite, more concrete, more serious, what does that mean? And how are we going to establish culture when you might be cutting a boundary in between multiple languages, multiple histories, multiple whatever? And that's what we're going to be looking at. And also the rise of a nation state as a form of political idea. So what does that look like, as I've kind of talked about a little bit already, and begin to emphasize nationalism and democracy. So even though we're in the 1750s through 1850s, I'm already looking at World War I, World War II, because nationalism and democracy are going to be key issues that lead us into those wars. And really, man, right now we are studying the history that's going to shape what we are dealing with literally in 2022. So, I mean, it's just fascinating times in history. All right, economic reformations. So we're going to see this new idea of free trade, the laissez-faire. So that basically means, hey, if I have a business and I want to run this business, the government should not interfere. They shouldn't impose any kind of restrictions, no quotas, no fees, no nothing. I should be able to make as much money as possible. So these free markets, these unregulated markets, are supposed to be like the most important things. But here's the thing. There's a bit of hypocrisy with these free markets, because most of the free markets are based upon slave labor. How do we have slave labor if it's a free market? So once again, it's about how much money you can make, but you're able to make that money because you're using the backs of enslaved people. Economic freedoms would yield just and more efficient societies. So this is going to be their belief, that these economic freedoms are going to yield more just societies. But the people making money are the ones who already had access to money and are able to produce things and have businesses and supplies and things like that. So if you have access, you're going to have more access. So if you don't have access, you're going to continue to be where you are. Okay, so the questions emerge of how far to extend these freedoms. So how free do we want to be? We have our economy free. Is our society going to be free? Is politics going to be free? And the answer to all those things is going to be a no. All right, so disagreements amongst revolutionaries on the extent of this freedom. So once again, does everyone in society get freedom, or just the wealthy people, or just the landowners, or just the men, or just the white men? What does that look like? Especially during this time period where we're going to see a lot of revolutions popping up. France is going to have a revolution. The United States is going to develop and have a revolution. We're going to see a lot of different things. South America is going to have, that map of revolutions is going to be ridiculous. Man, it's a lot of revolutions. So North American colonial development and conflict. So here we are, we're talking about the North American War of Independence, that American Revolution is going to happen between 1776 and 1783. So Great Britain is going to use, they're going to see these colonies as really, really prosperous. They're going to be utilizing all of their wonderful things that they're going to provide for them. But we still have this mercantilist belief that wealth has to be extracted and taken back to the mother country. So thinking about mercantilist belief, the people who live there aren't going to really enjoy that too much, because it feels like they don't really have any rights. They don't have any say, and they're just basically there to enrich England. That ain't fair. All right, anyway, so we're going to see a genteel class of merchants and plantation owners are going to develop colonial affairs. So once again, we're going to see people who sell things and people who own slaves that are producing things. So I don't want, when we think about America, we're like, oh man, the North was super anti-slavery. Man, not the North was profiting off of that slavery by selling these products and making profit off of these things in the same way the plantation owners in the South were making money off the backs of enslaved people as well. But we're going to see this land is always going to be an issue in the New World, possibly because there are already people living there. I don't know. Anyway, all right. So anyway, but beyond the Native American interactions that are going to come later on, a little bit later on in our history, or actually right now, but we're going to talk about them a little bit later on. We're going to see a lot of conflicts happening between big planters' interest with independent farmers. So basically those big businesses and those small farmers. So who's going to have more say, who's going to have more power? Obviously the big business owner is going to have more power. And we're still seeing impacts of that to this day, when it's like big business, like Amazon has more power and say than a small mom and pop store may have. So also settlers moving west looking for land, Native American conflicts are going to be a constant. Once again, the British way of interacting with Native Americans was to kill them off and to push them off of their lands. The French were more inclined to marry in or create family structures with Native Americans and learn from them, but the British saw no purpose or use for a lot of the Native Americans. And so also we have the French Revolution is going to end up ceding, they're going to cede their Canadian colony to the British after losing the 7 Years' War. So Napoleon's going to put them in a bad spot. And as a result of that, they're going to give up most of their North American property during this time period. And we're going to see a little bit later on, around 1803, 1804, they're going to give up the Louisiana area, or the Louisiana Purchase as we know of it in America. And they're going to lose all of their their continental North American territories. We still have a little bit of access happening in Haiti for a little bit until the Haitians kick them off. All right, and finally, British made some concessions to Indian interests, but they were not well enforced. So once again, the British are trying to be nice to Native Americans, but the colonies, the colonial people living there are like, nah, bruh, I'm good. Thank you. All right, so once again, our North American War of Independence, 1776, 1783. So the British did supreme. So we're going to see some asserting independence from the British. British are going to stand supreme in the Atlantic world, and political revolution seemed unimaginable. This is going to be the first time that anyone is going to successfully extract themselves from the British Empire, but it won't be the last. And we still see these things happening to this day. We just had Barbados extract themselves from the British kingdom. And I feel like Jamaica's on this way coming next too. But anyway, so we're going to see King George III is going to impose these ridiculous taxes to pay for the French and Indian War. So once again, the belief is, if I'm protecting this colony must pay for all the things that, are happening in France, or in Great Britain, excuse me. And the colonies, once again, don't believe that. They're like, yo, I'm making my own money over here. I've never been to Great Britain in my life. My mama never been to Great Britain in her life. Like, we are like third and fourth generation over here, been in here in America, and we ain't never been to Great Britain. So we don't have that connection to Great Britain in the same way that other people may have a connection to Great Britain. So me wanting to pay y'all taxes, I don't know y'all. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so we're going to see the colonialists are going to object to these new measures. They don't want any new taxes because they're already paying taxes for a place they have never visited or seen in their life, because most of them are third and fourth generation citizens at this point, or American colonists at this point. So we're going to see a lot of resistance in the form of boycotts and petitions. And then eventually we're going to start getting violent around 1776 with our Boston Tea Party, our Boston Massacre. And we're going to see our first person dying in the American Revolution was actually a Black dude named Crispus Attucks. And that there starts the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And we know who's going to win that, because where are we at right now? You guessed it, the United States of America. All right, so anyway, so calls for separating from Great Britain are also going to come from some of these Enlightenment ideals and thinking, like Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So we're going to see a document influenced heavily by Thomas Paine is going to be the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, who ends up being our third president, I believe. And so, hypocrisy, man-owned slaves. Anyway, okay. Natural right for people to govern themselves is what they believe. So people should be able to govern themselves and not have to listen to the monarch. So the monarch is an issue for these new American settlers, or these American settlers, excuse me, because they don't want to take things directly from one person. They want to have a say in how they're ruled. And we're going to see this, they're going to be inspired by John Locke's idea of a social contract. So once again, the people are going to be what allows the government to have its power. And if the people don't agree to that, then we're not going to have any kind of agreement happening with the government. It ain't going to be no government. And there comes the revolution. Political arrangements designed by Americans gave voting rights to only white male property owners. So we're talking about freedom, but what does that freedom look like from place to place? You'll see it's going to look different. So definitely not equitable in the new United States of America, because if you're a slave or an enslaved person, you don't have any rights, you don't have any access. And if you're a woman, good luck. And if you don't own property, good luck. And if it's just all these limiters. So many slaves are going to side with the British against the American Revolution because they offered them freedom in exchange for military service. So the Americans are offering you more time in being enslaved. Great Britain is saying, you fight with us, you're going to be free. So what are people going to do? They're going to try to fight with the British side. Okay. And so literally every single war that I know of that Americans have participated in, African Americans or Black people have been involved in literally every single one. African Americans, Native Americans. And so anyway, so so what's going to happen though? Obviously, the United States of America is going to begin to exist. So we're going to have the 1783 Treaty of Paris that's going to gain the U.S. its independence and its freedom, but we're still not done. We're going to go through some bumpy and rough periods. It's not always going to be easy. We still have to figure out the system, who has power, the states or the federal government, or what does the federal government look like? So it's about to get real crazy. Anyway, so here are, the maps of the revolutions. There's so many revolutions that are going to happen. So if we're looking, literally we have one that happens over here in Europe and Greece right here, 1829, but kaboom, let's go over here to look at North America, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America, and seeing all of revolutions. So we have America, 1776, or United States of America. We got Mexico, 1821. We have the United Provinces of Central America, 1823, Colombia, Haiti, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, we have Uruguay, Chile, Peru. There are so many places that are going through revolution during this time period, and let's start looking and learning about them. All right, so let's building a Republican government. So once again, even though we have this revolution, even though they were successful in the war, are they going to be successful as they start to build a new country that has never been done before? This is new, this is like, ooh, wow, amazing democracy. All right, so building a Republican government. So once again, we call America a republic because we vote for people who represent us. So that makes us a republic. If we were a direct democracy, we would vote for every single little thing that came up. But instead, we vote for people who vote for our best interests, even though they don't. All right, so much debate on the typical type of government to build. So like, what kind of government do we want? Do we want another king? Do we want King George Washington, or do we want a President George Washington? So are we going to have loose, and also the loose confederation of states are going to struggle to deal with local rebellions, foreign relations, and debt. So how do we control our financial structure? So what happens if Pennsylvania owes Georgia some money? Who pays that debt? And what if they can't pay that debt? Does the federal government pay that debt? Also, like, what does this mean for if we have a rebellion popping up, or we have some British people coming over here hanging out in Florida? Well, what's going to happen in Virginia? Are they going to be able to squash that, or things like that? So a lot of different things are going to arise as issues that they didn't even think about as issues because they didn't have to. All right, so 1786, we have the first Constitutional Convention, and that's going to forge a new charter for what our Republican government is going to look like. All right, so once again, that representative republic government, we're going to vote for somebody who votes for us. Anti-federalists are going to insist on the inclusion of the Bill of Rights to protect the individual liberties from government interference. So when we look at our Constitution, it had to be ratified by, I believe it was 3/4 of all of the new colonies. So we have these 13 new colonies. So 3/4, I think it's like, what was that, 9? Like 9 of them have to agree to this. So to get those last few states to sign on and to agree to this, they had to add the Bill of Rights. That's going to be 10 amendments to the Constitution: your freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, your right to not be quartered or have military people staying in your home, and your right to a whole lot of other things. If I thought about them long enough, I probably think of all of them, but my brain it's too early, guys. Sorry. All right. And so that's going to have to be included. And once that Bill of Rights is included, we're going to see that the Constitution is officially going to be ratified. And so the issue of slavery is also going to hold a temporary truce until the frontier pushed westward. So they're going to create this imaginary thing called the Mason-Dixon line. It's going to like supposedly draw a line that says where slavery is supposed to be. So if it's a new state that's going to be formed and it's above the Mason-Dixon line, well, that's going to be a free state. It's free state. If it's beneath or below the Mason-Dixon line, guess what? That's going to be a slave state. So in 1800, a Virginia slave, Gabriel Prosser, is going to raise an army of slaves with support from white artisans and laborers, but was betrayed, and he and 26 others are going to be executed. So we're also going to see too that there's going to be some slave rebellions that are going to pop up. We don't oftentimes hear about slave rebellions because they weren't always successful, but I promise you there was a whole lot of them. Unfortunately, only one of them has truly been successful in history. That's the one that's going to happen in Haiti. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but even that one wasn't truly successful because Haiti has been being victimized and abused by the French government ever since. Jeez. All right, the American Revolution ushered in a new age with the creation of the Republican form of government, which sent shockwaves through the Americas and Europe and beyond. Once again, the first time this was ever tried, ever, anywhere. So everybody is like, yo, what they doing over there in the United States? We need to, man, they doing something major over there. Let's go check it out. All right, so now we have our French Revolution. It's going to be a nice 10-year revolution that happens between 1789 and 1799. The French Revolution, even more than the American Revolution, inspired other rebellions around the world. Now, this is the truth, because the way they did it was spectacular, and the way they wrote about it was even more spectacular. So the French Revolution, all right, so the origins and outbreak. We have King Louis XVI is going to open the door to reform when he convened the Estate Generals, which had not been convened for over a century, in order to seek new forms of tax revenue to service the crown debts. So we have these three different estates are going to pop up, okay? So our third estate is going to be the common people. It's the largest group and they have the least amount of power. Sounds pretty common to pretty much every single society. Anyway, the next up, we have our first estate, which is going to be the clergy, because, you know, up there, God's got to be up there. And then number two, we have our aristocracy. So that's going to be where that's going to be where all the wealthy people who are friends and homies of Louis XVI. So the third estate organized themselves into a national assembly with a new legislative body for France. So they were like, yo, we are the most, and we are going to have a say, and y'all are going to listen to us. And if you don't, y'all finna die. All right, so on July 14, 1789, a thing known as Bastille Day happened, where the Parisian crowd attacked the Bastille, where a lot of political prisoners were being held. So these political prisoners are people who are spoken against Louis XVI. So Louis XVI is a spoiled man. He is the grandson of Louis XIV. His father was Louis XV. There's this big building called Versailles. Louis XIV built it. Louis XV enjoyed it, and Louis XVI is going to die for it. And we're going to read about it a little bit more coming up. All right, so within 3 weeks, the French National Assembly abolished privileges of the clergy and nobility and declared a new era of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Fraternity. So for men. All right, okay. All right, so what we're going to see, though, one of the most revolutionary documents that we're going to see is going to be from, I think it's I don't want to say, it might be Descartes, but I could be wrong, oh, who knows. Declarations of the rights of man and citizen was far more radical than the American Declaration of Independence. It guaranteed all citizens equality under the law and the sovereignty in the nation, all right? So all citizens, but who's a citizen? And that's the part we got to talk about. So war against old regime privileges threatened to end dynastic and aristocratic rule in Europe. So once again, these dynasties, these Louis the 14th, 15th, and 16th, these aristocratic rules, you having money, making you in power, and you only got money because you had money, your daddy had, anyway. So all of those things are going to be threatened. And we're going to say threatened because we still see today, look at England, they still have a monarchy. It might be for show, but it's still there. All right, women are going to argue for equal rights to citizenship. No, Olympia de Gauche is going to write the Declarations of Rights of Women and Citizens, proposing women's rights to divorce, hold property in marriage, education, and public careers. So we've already read a little bit of that in one of our assignments earlier this semester. So hopefully you remember to check that out again as well. So here we go. All male assembly rejected this because, you know, why spend extra money on educating women and stuff when we can spend that money on enriching our new democracy or our new country or society that's going to develop. Okay, so they're going to believe that for fraternity of free men compose the nation. So only men. So once again, the definition of what these freedoms look like and enlightenments look like depend on how much money you have, the color of your skin, and if you own property or not. Blessings. Yay. All right. So as the revolution gathered speed, deep divisions emerged, obviously. Okay. So in 1792, declared preemptive war against Austria, Prussia, Britain, and Russia. And we're going to see foreign armies and a civil war all happening because it's nothing but madness happening during this time period. And also they're killing people because anyway, let's just go to the next one. All right. So here we go. More the terror, because the French were actually like psychotic and crazy and stuff with this stuff. So we have Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette are going to be executed with the guillotine. You know, Jack and Jill fall down the hill and their heads come tumbling down. So we're going to see them. A lot of people are going to be guillotined who are in aristocracy, who are in power. We're going to see these elite reformers and radicalists are going to launch the reign of terror, where they're just going to murder off anybody who has money and anyone who opposes their views. It's quite great. Man, one of the bloodier times in European history. And they always look at other minority groups like, oh my God, I can't believe they're so dangerous. And I'm like, look at the revolutions. Whew, crazy. All right, so we're going to have this one dude who's going to take some power, Robespierre, okay? So he's going to take over the Committee of Public Safety, and he's going to execute 40,000 peasants and laborers, quote unquote, the enemies of the people. So once again, these elite reformers and radicalists want change to happen mightily and quickly, and anyone who was not listening to them had to die, even if they probably should. Anyway, it's just crazy. So anyway, they're going to kill lots of people. They're going to have an army of about 800,000 people, which is a lot during this time period. In 1794, the moderates, though, are going to regain control, and the radicals are going to lose control, and Robespierre is going to be what? Killed, like everybody else who disagreed with people. It's kind of nice. So then we have Napoleon, who's the leader of these 800,000 soldiers, is going to come to power with a coup d'etat. So once again, that's when the military seizes power from a government. So he's going to put security in order ahead of social reforms. So all of this women equality, blah, 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 he doesn't care. He's all about, how can I stabilize the borders, get more money, and conquer other places around us. He's going to ease religious tension. So we have issues happening between the Huguenots and some of these Catholic or Protestants or whoever else is living in France during this time period. It's mostly Catholics and Huguenots who are arguing and stuff. So he's going to ease some of those tensions. A lot of the Huguenots are going to start to flee and have to run away. He's going to retreat from Republican principles because he don't care what the people say. He is a military leader who has seized power via a coup. That is a different governing style than we have in America. America has a republic. He doesn't care about your opinions. He doesn't care about the declarations of man, the declarations of rights of man, or the declarations of rights of women. He don't care. He just cares about growing the borders and stabilizing the country. He's going to implement a national tax, because how else are you going to pay for your military to grow your borders and defend everything? Y'all got to pay for this protection and growth that you're going to see. And we're going to see he's going to create a civil legal code called the Code of Napoleon, which hopes to kind of make more just or more fair principles and rules, kind of similar to how other codification or manuals have worked throughout history. We had the Code of Manu. We've had a few other ones that my brain is now drawing a blank on, but there are a bunch of codifications that have worked to make a more just legal system. All right, here comes the Napoleonic era. It ain't gonna last too long, but here we go, 1799, 1815. He's gonna launch large campaigns, military campaigns, to build a vast empire. He's trying to be like Alexander the Great, but the little short French version. He's gonna champion principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. All right, so liberty, the right to have freedom if you're a white man who owns property, equality if you're a white man who owns property, and fraternity if you're like literally a dude, because fraternities are literally for dudes. Many local populations initially embraced the French as liberators. They were like, yes, get us away from some of these crazy people. But there are going to be some other ones who are not as happy about that. So we're going to see some strong resistance in Portugal, in Spain, in Russia, in Germany, and in Italy. They are all going to say, hey, yo, take your little Napoleonic self away from us. So then we're going to have our Peninsular War between 1808 and 1813. So Napoleon's going to be, winning, but Napoleon's going to start to take some losses as well. And we're going to see that he's going to have some cracks in his military might and his power. And is he... All right, let's see. All right, so we're going to see that a lot of places are also going to look to their own national past for inspiration to oppose the French. So the same way we're talking about nation states having a shared language, culture, and history, how are you going to repel and push out a military dictator? You're going to go back to your history and your culture and your language and use that to secure you and protect you along the way. So it's going to lay the foundations for nationalist strife. So once again, this nationalism, this believing that your country is the best country, your area is the best area, is going to eventually lead us directly into World War I, World War II, and heck, even where we are right now with Russia and Ukraine and oh my God, nationalism. All right, so Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. I'm gonna just say this. Everybody who's invaded Russia in the winter has lost. Don't do it. We're talking about the Mongols. We're talking about Napoleon. And then Hitler did not learn. Those three are the biggest ones. Anyway, so they're going to go in. He's going to kill off a lot of his soldiers because the winter is so harsh and it lasts for so long. We're talking winter is September to May in certain parts of Russia, September to May. That is about 8 months of the year. It is freezing cold. No one is prepared for that or has supplies for that. So major European powers are going to unite that nationalism to bond them together, and they're going to defeat Napoleon in 1815 with the Battle of Waterloo. So ensuing ensuing struggles are going to struggles between those who wanted more liberal order and those who wanted a return to society as before the French Revolution. So that aristocratic power is going to be in battle with those who have with the larger population of peasants or those who don't have as much financial resource and access. So who's going to win? What's going to happen? We'll see. All right, so let's look at how big Napoleon was able to grow his empire. So we're literally talking from North Africa right here, all the way through the Iberian Peninsula. That's where Spain and Portugal is located, the Iberian Peninsula. He's going to have some allegiances all throughout here. And wait, no, my bad. These are the allegiances right here, my bad. Austria, Russia, Norway, but he's going to control all of this area. He's going to, have under control all of this as well. So that's a lot of territory. We're looking at, huge, vast amounts of land that, man, the Ottomans are probably the next ones who have another comparable size, or China or Russia. But this is a huge amount of control that he was able to have for about 15, 16 years. All right, so here comes some revolutions. The only successful slave or enslaved uprising in our world's history. So unlike the British North America, Saint-Domingue presented a case where revolution came from the bottom rungs of society, from the African slaves, okay? So in North America, it's people who are merchants who have money. Those are the ones who are leading the revolution. In Haiti, we're gonna see that it's gonna be the enslaved population. So with that, that also means how the revolution is accepted or treated is going to be different because of who is doing the revolution. So it's all good when it's wealthy white dudes, but when you have a bunch of enslaved Africans, then we're going to have some issues and problems. And I'm like, what gives? They just want freedom and stuff too. It's crazy. So we're going to see they're going to apply the concepts of freedom just as they had. They're going to apply the concept of freedom, not just from Europe, but from white planters as well. So they're going to be inspired by what's happening in Haiti with the white planters. So we're going to see a whole bunch of slaves and very, very few French settlers trying to control or trying to dominate these people. So we have 500,000 enslaved Africans. We have 40,000 white French settlers, and then we have 30,000 free people of color. So after 1789, the whites campaigned for self-government because Haiti is a part of France, or was a part of the French government, right? So, okay, all right. So these white planters are now going to show these enslaved people the way. It's amazing. Okay. So we're going to see that while slaves use the language of the French Revolution to call for freedom. So the white settlers are going to say, yo, we want independence. And then slave people are like, me too, son. Me too. All right. What you got, I want. Give me that. All right. So in 1793, the French National Convention abolished slavery. Okay. And so with that, we're going to see that the former slaves are going to take over their colony. So yeah, so the French are going to abolish slavery, but slavery doesn't necessarily end in Haiti until, the uprising happens. So it's great. So we have Toussaint Louverture is going to eventually lead an uprising that's going to basically knock off slavery throughout all of Haiti. But the only thing with that is that the Haitians have been continuously victimized financially, militarily, and in so many other ways, economically, by the French government and by a lot of European governments, or even American governments as well, and kind of abused because of what they did in 1780s, 1790s. All right, now we have our revolutions in Spanish and Portuguese America. So we're gonna kind of move a little bit further down in the Americas and see what's happening with the Spanish and Portuguese. So revolutionary enthusiasm spread to Spanish and Portuguese America. Well, it has to. Everybody's got their ear to the street and they're like, yo, I heard what happened in America. I see what's happening in Haiti. I see what's happening in France. Well, guess what's going to happen in my place too? We're going to blow this stuff up. All right. So political upheavals began first from subordinate people of color, just like in Haiti. But the subordinate people of color are going to be more mixed blood people who have mulatto, mestizo, things like that. So they're going to be, I don't want to say accepted a little bit more than Africans, but they actually are, because that's kind of how the caste systems work. White people are usually at the tops, and Africans are always at the bottom, and everyone else is kind of in between there. All right, so we're going to see, once again, these European ideas are going to be mobilized against European colonizers. So even before the French Revolution, the Andean Indians rebelled against the Spanish colonial authority. So in 1780, we had between 40,000 and 60,000 Andean Indians besiege the capital of Cusco and demand freedom from forced labor. So they are tired of being enslaved, and they are fighting back. And rebellions were usually temporary, okay? So they temporarily renewed the loyalty of the Iberian American elites to the crown of Portugal and Spain. So when these revolutions happened, it was like, oh my God, we actually need your military to save us. And then when the revolutions died down, the white settlers there were like, yo, maybe we don't need you guys so much. So once again, they really said they only need the government when they're having revolutions and uprisings to kind of use their military, but they really wanted to be separated from all of their European colonizing empires. Brazil and constitutional monarchy. So Brazil's road to statehood involved little political turmoil and no social revolution. Crazy. All right, but it's still a pretty nasty and abusive place to a lot of the minorities that are living there who are not white adjacent. So when French troops occupied Lisbon, the royal family fled to Brazil and ruled their empire from there. Makes sense, you know, got land there, got your homies there, might as well. The royals made reforms in administration, agriculture, and manufacturing. So they're going to build up parts of Brazil. They're going to put roads in. They're going to establish schools, build hospitals, all of those things that they hadn't really cared about when it was just a slave colony there to produce sugar and there to produce other things, rubber and things like that. So we're going to see shared power with local political aristocracy, and the economy is going to prosper while slavery is also going to expand. So once again, the most Africans outside of Africa live in Brazil. If you look at the map of the world, let's go back to the map for 1 second so we can see it. If we look at the map of the world, you can see that West Africa, where the majority of slaves are going to come from, is right here, and the most closest landmass after you leave the coast of West Africa going west is going to be Brazil. Hence why there are so many Africans living in Brazil, who the most Africans, over hundreds of millions of Africans living outside of Brazil, out of West Africa, excuse me. All right, so with that, we're going to see an expansion of slavery, and slavery in Brazil is kind of like slavery in the Caribbean. It's super brutal, super horrible, it's super bad, and people are, and there are going to be rebellions there too, but usually those rebellions are in the form of the natives are going to flee into the mountainside, flee into the forest in the Amazon, because a lot of those white European settlers would not follow them there and could not survive in the Amazon forest for a number of reasons. So in 1821, the king's going to return to Portugal, but left his one son, Pedro, in charge of Rio de Janeiro. So in 1822, Pedro is going to declare Brazil independent with a constitutional monarchy. So once again, he's going to be the one who is independent from Portugal, but it is still in control of the same family that rules Portugal. So Pedro was supported by Brazilian elites who wanted to avoid slave insurrections or regional insurrections. So they're looking at what's happening in Haiti, looking at what's happening in other places around the world, and they're saying, we don't want to end up like them. So let's separate from our mother country, our colonial, our empire country, Portugal, and let's kind of start our own thing that can be a little bit more fair and just, and hopefully lead us away from insurrections and overthrows and things like that. So by 1840, Brazil had achieved political stability unmatched in the Americas, because they already had a blueprint laid out what previously happened in Portugal, and they already had a monarchy and all of those things. So even though we have a republic happening in America, we have a slave uprising happening in Haiti, we have, so many different, we have a military dictatorship happening in France. Here we have a monarchy that's being established in Brazil. Even though we see that a lot of people are moving away from monarchies, Brazil is going to walk towards it and embrace that. Next up, we have Mexico. And so with Mexico, we have the other Spanish colonies are going to gain autonomy from the Spanish crown during the Napoleonic Wars. So 1829, I believe, is when it said that Mexico got its independence. Let's go back and check it out. I don't want to lie. 1821 is when Mexico is going to end up getting their independence from Spain. And all this is like, we think about all the wars that are happening, all the issues that Spain is having controlling their land. So it's just kind of inevitable that they're going to lose their power and access. So locally born Creoles resented the reappointment of power to the peninsulars, colonial officials born in Spain. So basically, if you were born in Spain, you had more power and authority than those, and you were born in Spain and moved into Mexico, you had more power and authority than those who had been living in Mexico for their whole entire lives, had grown up in Mexico, had been there for generations, had established roots there, businesses, families, all those things. And the people living there, those Creoles, those mixed race people, the mix between the indigenous and the European, were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why is it just because you're white that you have more authority and power than I do? So Creoles are going to wish to regain this elite position. How are they going to do it? They're going to be inspired by these Enlightenment ideals. So just like other places, they're going to put out their own declarations and their own words and all these things, okay? And so we're going to see that Creoles are going to identify more as Mexicans than as Spanish Americans because they don't have a connection to Spain. They've never been to Spain, and their families have lived in Mexico for generations now, similar to what happened in the United States of America, where all of those people who were fighting in the revolution had never been to England and didn't have a connection to England and didn't understand why they had to pay taxes to England. So with that, we're going to see the Creoles are going to identify as Mexican and not as Spanish. So when the Spanish crown was unable to govern effectively, Mexican generals with Creole support proclaimed Mexico's independence in 1821. And so unlike what happened in Brazil, unfortunately, Mexico's secession did not lead to stability. They're going to have some continued issues, some continued wars. And we're even going to see that happening with the Mexican-American war that's going to happen a little bit later, where they're going to lose a large amount of their northern territory and so on and so forth. So Latin American nation building, and I think this is one of our last slides before we come to an end. So look at this map, check it out. You can see the United Provinces of Central America through here: Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Honduras, British Honduras, the Galapagos Islands or Ecuador. So many other places that are going to kind of pop up and rise up during this time period as well, or get the revolutions and separation from the Spanish government, or the French government, or the Dutch, or the Portuguese, or whoever else is controlling them during this time period. All right, so I think this is the last one. I'm not quite sure if I did this one in the previous video or not, but I'm going to do it over anyway. So other South American revolutions that are going to happen: independence from Spain and Spanish America was more prolonged and militarized than the American independence from Britain. So Spain realized that if they let go of these properties, they're never going to get them back. And those are their cash cows. That's how they're able to get the most wealth, the most everything. And so, yeah, they had to fight a little bit harder than the British did. So Venezuela's Simón Bolívar and Argentina's José de San Martín are going to wage extended wars for independence against Spain between 1810 and 1824, with varying degrees of success. Anyway, and moving on, still with varying degrees of success to this day. So political revolutions against the Spanish colonial authority escalated into social struggles among Indians, mestizos, enslaved people, and whites. So now we have a civil war over new colonial order. So who's going to be on top? Who's going to be on bottom? I can promise you, white people are still going to be on top, and the enslaved are still going to be on the bottom. But the Indians and mestizos, that is where we're going to see kind of a power struggle, really, for like the caste system and where they're going to fall in order. And even to this day, in a lot of these formerly Spanish and Portuguese and all other controlled areas, we still have that racial caste system where if you were kind of white adjacent or more white appearing as a Latino, you have more power in society than if you are an Afro-Latino or an African presenting Latino in society. Debate over forming new Latin American confederations or national republics. So Bolivar advocated for a Latin American confederation. He wanted, like how the US kind of had states kind of organized, he wanted to do the same thing in Latin America. But unfortunately, local identities are going to prevail with unstable national republics. So they're going to have this nationalism idea, but they're not necessarily going to be set up for success. And we can look at that. The reasons why they're not set up for success is because, man, for the last 100 years, Europe has been robbing them blind and taking everything from them, while also destabilizing their countries and not allowing them to practice their own political authority, not allowing them to have their own economic system. So when they fight off Europe and get rid of their European colonizers, well, guess what? They don't have the infrastructure or the skill or the practice to make things happen as they would have if Europe had left them alone in the first place. All right. new national republics were controlled by military chieftains and landed wealthy elites. So once again, we still don't see republics in the true form that we have in the United States of America. We see them that they're still going to be controlled by the military leaders, which is still happening a lot in Central America, which has led to a lot of violence and destabilization. And also the wealthy elites are still in power in America, in Central America as well. So we had revolutions and change, but dang it, it wasn't always for the best. And the people who needed the most change and the most support weren't always the ones who got it. All right, so we're gonna keep on going with the next video. Hopefully you guys have already started watching that, and check this video out because you will have a quiz coming up next time I see you guys. Have a great day, and see you guys soon. Bye.